Okay. Looks like we good. I tell you, this app is bipolar, man. This app that I stream from, man. Give y'all a second to get up in here because I didn't get an opportunity to do things the way I normally do, where you guys get notifications on my lives. This is just, we got to do spur of the moment. But we gonna chop some game. As y'all come in, of course, as always, wipe your feet off at the door when you step into a pimp's domain. Hit that like button. And we gonna chop some game about this Carmelo Anthony situation, as well as the Cyrus Carmack-Belton situation. But y'all know my first order of business, I got to hydrate my game, man. OB, the bully says, I received a notification. You probably received a notification for the previous live that I just ended that was giving me technical difficulties. But either way it goes, I'm glad you received a notification and that you're here now. You dig? Oh, shit. Spilling H to the Izzo. This damn bottle is too damn big, man. That's one thing I done learned about Peru. They got, well, really all these different countries in Latin America, man, they all got different sizes of bottles when it comes to water. Like this bottle, for instance. This is a 2.5 liter bottle of water. I ain't never seen a 2.5 liter bottle of water before. It's kind of odd. Let me show you. Something else I've never seen is a 10 liter bottle of water. Crazy. It's a damn 10 liter bottle of water, which is damn near 3 gallons. Crazy. But yeah, that's Peru for you. But anyway, cheers to the game. Let's get into it, man. So, the whole Carmelo Anthony situation. First, the trial with rest in peace to Cyrus Carmack-Belton. His trial with his killer, which is Rick Chow. You know, Rick Chow was found not guilty. That got a lot of people in an uproar, outrage. Then you have the situation with Carmelo Anthony most recently, where he was found guilty and immediately sentenced to 35 years, which is kind of odd to me. I don't know how Texas works. I've never been through the Texas quote-unquote justice system, fortunately for me. But I've never heard of somebody getting sentenced to 35 years the same day they get convicted. That's kind of odd to me. The places that I've been and the places that I'm familiar with, which is unfortunately quite a few states within the United States, things don't usually move that fast. So I don't know. It's just crazy to me. It seems like they just couldn't wait to convict him. They did everything in their power to convict him and not give him a fair trial. And then it's like now that he's convicted, they can't wait to hurry up and get him out the way. And you know what the recourse that that our people take is just it's disgusting to me, man. Because with this whole Carmelo Anthony situation, there's all these rumors that start online, and people just take them and run with them, and that's kind of to be expected. But what's even worse is when you have big platforms, people who are content creators that have big platforms, report things irresponsibly. I ain't gonna say no names, but I was just watching somebody that got over 1 million subscribers talking about the situation and putting certain information out there that hasn't been proven to be true, that there's no evidence of, right, that favors Carmelo Anthony. And you don't have to do that to make the system look like what it is. We don't have to come with rumors and lies in order to make the system look a certain way and make Carmelo Anthony look more favorable. The system is janky already. The system is rigged already. And it's obvious to people that got the right kind of eyes, just looking at things through the right lenses. We don't have to lie on the system. We don't have to make rumors on the system to make it look worse than what it is. It just as it is, it looks bad enough. It's obvious. And, when I see these things, like what happened to Cyrus Carmack-Belton and now what's happening to Carmelo Anthony, it's very sad and even disheartening. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. And, it's crazy because our people are so ignorant. It's disgusting. And what I mean by that is, well, I shouldn't say all of our people, but a good amount of our people, the way that they behave is disgusting. Because when it comes to Cyrus Carmack-Belton, you have so many black people that get on the internet and talk about how he was wrong in what he did. They say that he had a gun. Honestly, because I know how the system is janky and the system is rigged, I honestly don't believe that he had a gun. People just take what they say, the powers that be, people just take what they say and run with it. But I don't believe he had a gun. Is it possible? Yeah, but I just don't believe that. I don't believe that he dropped a gun while he was running and the gun was found like some distance away from him, but at the same time, he was able to point the gun at Rick Child's son before he got killed. It don't make no sense, but people just accept this and then use this to condemn and negatively criticize Cyrus. Black people. Them other people is to be expected. It don't surprise me, and it doesn't make me feel any type of way when non-black people have so much criticism for Cyrus, because it's to be expected. Don't nobody like us. So I don't, that don't surprise me. But what I guess it doesn't surprise me also because I know my people and how my people can be. But it's just disappointing when you see black people get on the internet and condemn Cyrus and say how he was wrong, this, that, and the third, not keeping in mind that, this is a 14-year-old kid. And people forget what it's like to be a 14-year-old kid, for one. And then two, people don't consider what it's like to be a 14-year-old kid in these times. So, and they hold this young man to a standard of somebody like themselves, which is like, you got all these grown people that's in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and so forth that are black, just like Cyrus, and they're condemning this young man. And it's unfortunate because he's so young, and they hold him to a standard that he doesn't deserve to be held to, for one. But then also it's disappointing because we have enough people who are not like us, who don't look like us, pointing the finger at us. And then to add insult to injury, we got people among us pointing the finger at us. We're pointing the finger at ourselves. It's just disgusting and it's crazy. And, it gives them the leverage to say, see, this is how you know we're right. They got their own people saying this about their own people. It should never be that way because, you don't see that as much among the other races and ethnicities. When it's one of their own, they don't flood the internet condemning their own people. We the only ones that do that at the magnitude that we do it. Yeah, you'll have some like with the Kyle Rittenhouse dude, you might have a few white people condemning him online, but it's mostly us. There's not as many white people that were condemning him online as there is black people condemning Cyrus online, and even Carmelo Anthony. But yeah, like I said, I don't believe Cyrus had no gun. And whatever the case is, even if he did have a gun, he obviously didn't use it. He left the store and was chased as a 14-year-old boy. There's no way that you can justify that. And then, like I said, people come with these rumors and things to try to make the system look worse than what it is, but it's unnecessary because look at Rick Child's history. This dude has a history of assaulting children and shooting at people that are unarmed. He got a history of this. But, people will say, oh, that's just South Carolina. No, that's just the United States. That's just the way the system is working exactly the way it was designed to work. That's all that is. And then even now with the Carmelo Anthony situation, man, you have a young man who was 17 years old at the time. And, it's a very unfortunate situation. Do I believe that Austin Metcalf deserved to die? No. He didn't deserve to lose his life like that. But at the same time, you cannot fault Carmelo Anthony, somebody who was much, much physically smaller than Austin Metcalf, to defend himself the way that he did. Because if the tables was turned, let's say that Carmelo was unarmed and they just had a fist fight between the two of them. Is chairs around, is probably concrete around. There's things that, let's say that Carmelo would have hit his head on the ground the wrong way or up against an object the wrong way and ended up losing his life. I guarantee you the outcome wouldn't be the same. I guarantee you that Austin Metcalf would have been found not guilty, or at the worst, he probably would have been found guilty of some type of lesser charge and been sentenced to probation for a couple of years. He wouldn't have did no time. Things like that. But, when it's a young black man, he's held his feet are held to the fire worse than anybody else. Murder, first degree murder. I don't see that. I don't see this 17-year-old kid that has a 3.7 GPA that is, a highly regarded athlete at his school, no history of getting in trouble. I don't see this kid being a murderer. But it just goes to show you how the system is rigged. They gave him a dump truck ass lawyer, which his family, I can't blame them. His parents, they probably didn't understand, how the system works, because they've probably never been in trouble either or been in this kind of situation before. So, they don't know how to go about making the right decisions in this situation. So you can't really fault them. But the system is rigged and is predatory towards our people. We know this. But I just wanted to show y'all something, right? Hold up. Oh my God. Y'all let me know if y'all can hear me and see me, man. This shit is crazy. It's pissing me the fuck off. God damn. I mean, I look cool on my end. It look like it's cool now. Y'all let me know though, man. I know it was tripping just a few seconds ago, but it looks like we good now. Y'all let me know, man. I'm watching it from YouTube, and I'm watching it, of course, from my end, and everything looks cool. But some of y'all are still saying that it's choppy. I don't know if it's because y'all a few seconds behind. I'm giving y'all a second to catch up and see that everything is cool. Okay. The Sub Genius Society say it's cool. So it looked like y'all catching up. Okay, man. So what I was trying to do was show y'all what I asked Gemini on my screen about these types of situations. But since this bullshit ass app don't want to cooperate with a pimp, I'm going to just have to read it to you from my phone. Or I might be able to play it to you from the phone. Let me see. Let me see. See what Gemini is talking about. God damn, boy, everybody and their mama want to call me now. Don't nobody want to call a pimp when I ain't doing nothing, but when I am doing something, everybody want to call a pimp. Okay, listen. So this is what I asked Gemini, right? Regarding these types of situations, the situation with Cyrus Carmack-Belton and the situation with Carmelo Anthony. Because on one side, with the Cyrus Carmack-Belton situation, you have a non-black defendant with a black victim. On the other side, with the Carmelo Anthony situation, you have a black defendant with a non-black victim. So this is what I asked Gemini in regards to that. I said, what are the U.S. conviction rates of murder cases in which the victim is black and the defendant is non-black versus when the defendant is black and the victim is non-black? Okay, so I know that sounds a little, confusing and tongue-tied, but this is what Gemini's response to that question was. When looking at how the U.S. criminal justice system handles murder cases based on racial dynamics, criminologists and legal scholars generally separate the data into two distinct parts of the process. The conviction rate, whether, in parentheses it says, whether a case ends in a guilty verdict or a plea, and the sentencing severity, how harshly the person is punished once convicted, specifically regarding the death penalty and life sentences. Interestingly, while comprehensive data on raw conviction rates specifically isolated to racial or interracial pairs is sparse, decades of extensive data on sentencing and wrongful convictions paint a highly detailed picture of how these two scenarios play out. Number one, conviction rates and system trajectory. In studies tracking standard felony murder trials through the court system, the difference in the absolute probability of getting a conviction at trial between a black on non-black crime and a non-black on black crime is relatively narrow, but the paths to those convictions look vastly different. Okay, so a black defendant versus a non-black victim. These cases are significantly more likely to be prosecuted at the highest possible level of offense, such as capital murder and first-degree murder rather than manslaughter. They are also significantly more likely to go to a full trial rather than being resolved with a lenient plea bargain. So this is when the defendant is black, the person is being charged is black, and the victim is non-black. So, white, Asian, Latino, what have you. Okay? So now we're going to talk about when the defendant, the person being charged, is non-black and the victim is black. Statistically, homicides involving black victims are less likely to result in capital charges. When a non-black victim is suspected of, or non-black individual is suspected of killing a black individual, prosecutors are statistically more likely to accept lesser plea deals, or the cases face higher rates of dropping out before the trial due to evidentiary or clearance issues. Okay, so that just basically breaks down how when a black person is charged for killing a white or non-black, capital punishment is the death penalty. Whereas if it's a non-black person being charged for killing a black person, more than likely they're going to receive a lesser charge, like manslaughter or maybe, negligent homicide or something even lesser. But they're less likely to face a capital punishment charge or, a life sentence or something like that, right? So now it talks about, from there, sentencing severity, the real disparity. So this is where the real disparity comes in, the severity of the sentence. Where the data becomes stark and heavily documented is in the outcome after a charge is brought, particularly when looking at capital punishment. Decades of research, starting with the landmark Baldus study and reinforced by organizations like the Death Penalty Information Center, show that the race of the victim is the single most powerful extra-legal predictor of whether a defendant receives the death penalty or a life sentence. Let me read that again. The race of the victim is the single most powerful extra-legal predictor of whether a defendant receives the death penalty or a life sentence. So if the victim is non-black and the person being charged is black, versus when the victim is black and the person being charged is non-black, that's the biggest determining predictor, the biggest extra legal predictor, as they say, as to whether or not the person being charged, the defendant, is going to receive the death penalty or a life sentence. So that just right there lets you know that the system is rigged. If you're black and you're being charged with, killing a non-black person, you have a much higher likelihood of getting a life sentence or the death penalty. Whereas if you're not black and the victim is black, you have a much less likelihood of getting a life sentence or the death penalty. Okay, case dynamics. Likelihood of harshest sentencing, death penalty / life without parole. Black defendant, white victim, the highest. Defendants in this category are up to 3 to 4 times more likely to receive a death sentence than any other racial combination for the same tier of homicide. So if it's a black defendant, a black person being charged, and a white victim, people in this category up to 3 to 4 times more likely to receive a death sentence than any other racial combination for the same tier of homicide. So if you black and you being charged with killing a white person, you're 3 to 4 times more likely to get the death penalty than any other way that you could slice the pie. Okay, so a non-black defendant with a black victim, the lowest. Historically, cases where the victim is black and the defendant is white or non-black have the lowest probability of resulting in a death sentence or maximum tier sentencing. So it's no mystery. It's rigged. So that's why this situation really shouldn't surprise you, man. It's unfortunate, it's sad, it's fucked up, all the shit. But when you look into how things are the way that they are, it shouldn't surprise you at all. See something, hold on. Cause I had looked something else up on this other phone. Hold on. So check this out, right? Why do the conviction patterns diverge? The system studies point to three primary mechanisms driving this gap. Cross-racial identification errors. Eyewitnesses misidentified wrongful convictions. Criminological data shows that cross-racial identification, a witness identifying a suspect of a different race, is highly unreliable. White witnesses or victims are statistically much more likely to misidentify a black suspect, which introduces flawed evidence into trials and skews conviction rates, which even though that didn't happen in either of these cases with Carmelo Anthony and Cyrus, Carmack-Belton, you know, that's still a real thing. So it's basically letting you know that a lot of brothers who are currently locked up for, you know, probably taking the life of a non-black person was more than likely identified by a non-black person wrongfully and still were convicted. Okay, so prosecutorial discretion. District attorneys hold immense power over whether a case goes to trial, what charges are brought, and what plea deals are offered. Statistically, prosecutors are more likely to seek first-degree or capital murder charges when the victim is white or non-black, and more likely to accept lesser plea deals like manslaughter or drop charges when the victim is black. Jury bias and representation. Now this applies to the Carmelo Anthony situation. Check this out. Implicit bias regarding race and criminality heavily influence jury deliberations. Furthermore, historical underrepresentation of black jurors on trial panels, often due to the strategic use of preemptory strikes during jury selection. Cold shit. Statistically increase the likelihood of a conviction for a black defendant. So it's letting you know right here how they get down. Underrepresentation of black jurors on trial panels, often due to the strategic use of preemptory strikes during jury selection. They had 12 jurors and 6 reserve jurors, a total of 18 jurors, none of which were black and white defendants. Well, it's pretty much letting you know that when it says, hold on, let me go back. Right, like right here. Statistically, prosecutors are more likely to seek first-degree or capital murder charges when the victim is white or non-black, and more likely to accept lesser plea deals like manslaughter or drop charges when the victim is black. So that lets you know right there, like if it's a non-black person, accused of killing a black person, then they have a much higher likelihood of, getting a lesser plea deal like manslaughter or the charges just being dropped altogether. Whereas if the person being charged is black and the victim is non-black, that individual has a much higher likelihood of being charged with, capital murder or first degree murder, which capital murder can result in a death penalty. That's when you black being accused of killing somebody that's not black. You got a much higher likelihood of getting them type of charges and also being convicted. So it just lets you know that the system is rigged, man. And I've known, as far back as I can remember that the system is rigged. But of course, it just becomes more and more blatantly obvious as time goes on and you get older and become wiser and, just are able to see things through more mature lenses, man. This shit right here, it ain't no surprise. Tony Skrilla saying, is he muted? Nah, that's your audio. Hold on. Maybe you got to turn your volume up. Because everybody else seems to hear me just fine. Oh, he's saying his connection is tripping on his end. Yeah, it was tripping on my end for a minute, man, but you can't blame me this time, man. I finally got it together, man, so it ain't me. Right. Fantasy Island says no way Rick Chow should have beat that case. Of course not. And if Rick Chow was black, again, if you take that same situation with Rick Chow, right? Let's say Rick Chow was a black man and Cyrus Carmack-Belton was non-black, was not a black kid, right? He could have been any other race. He could have been Asian. He could have been Latino. But especially if he was white. If you have a black store owner with that same scenario, allegedly this little white kid, he ran, dropped a gun, but in the midst of dropping the gun, somehow pointed the gun at the black man's son, and the black man gunned him down and killed him, 14 years old. That black man gonna get the death penalty, most likely. And if he don't get the death penalty, he gonna spend the rest of his life in prison, for sure. Especially if he got the same history as a black man that Rick Chow has. Again, let's just take this black man, you put him in South Carolina, he got a convenience store or what have you, and he has a history of shooting at non-black, unarmed customers, and also a history of assaulting non-black children. He wouldn't even made it this far. You know, for them times that he shot at non-black customers as a black man, he probably would have got attempted murder charges and been sentenced to 30 or 40 years, something crazy like that. Even though nobody died, he would have been charged and convicted a long time ago. Black man wouldn't even made it this far. I don't know how several people were saying they can't hear me. I don't know what's up with y'all. Dapper, I don't know how you can't hear me. Yeah, so I guess if you can't hear, man, you got to go out and come back in. Maybe that'll help the situation. Because I can hear myself fine, and everybody else seems to be able to hear me just fine. But for some reason, some people can't hear me. They say the Chinese dude had a black lawyer defending him. Yeah, he did have a black lawyer. But and it's crazy how that works out, right? When you got a black victim, the defendant has a black lawyer in the Cyrus Carmack-Belton case, and then on the other situation with Carmelo Anthony, you got a white victim with a white lawyer. Oh, Lojo is saying, click on the video, then click on the live again. I had the same problem. T-Bass, good looking. He said, your audio good, Freeze. Okay, cool. Men Guarding Their Own Wallet says, does the judicial system know that darker skinned people are more logical than lighter skinned people? If so, is this why the darker skinned people receive heftier sentences than lighter skinned people? Nah, it's deeper than that. That's part of it, but it's deeper than that. The system is just rigged. The system from the gate, when this system and these institutions were established, they were established with the mindset of oppressing black people. When the prisons were, developed, when the court system was developed, when law enforcement was developed, to where you had all these big police forces, because, if you go back in time, they didn't have these big, powerful police forces that we have now. Like back during the slavery days, when slavery was in effect, we didn't have these big police forces with thousands of officers. You know how the LA County Sheriff's Department got thousands of officers. Los Angeles Police Department got thousands of officers. These things didn't exist when slavery was in effect. But when slavery was abolished, that's when all of these things, came into play and became as we know them now. So, but like I said, these institutions and these systems were developed with the mindset of, oppressing black people. Because black people make up about 13% of the U.S. population. Between 13 and 14%. Black people make up the U.S. population. Yet, 50% of the wrongful convictions in the United States are against black people. 50%, more than 50% of everybody wrongfully convicted of a crime in the U.S. is black people. That's not by accident. That's not a mystery. And so, you know, all these people who condemn Carmelo Anthony and say he's a murderer and all this, that, and the third, right? Say how wrong he was. And all the people who say how wrong Cyrus Carmack-Belton was and how justified Rick Chow was and all of this shit, right? What do those people have to say about the statistics? Because, you know, when these people get found wrongfully convicted, what do you have to say then? When your quote unquote justice system finds these people innocent, they convicted, and some of these people, man, I remember I seen a dude, it was a man a few years ago, a brother. This man did like, man, I think he did like 60 years or 50 something years in prison. This man did like 50 something years in prison at least, and then was found to be wrongfully convicted. And then they gave him, they of course released him, and they gave him a few $1 million. And, you know, that's cool to be able to get a few $1 million, but they locked this man up when he was pretty much a kid. And I think he was in his 70s now or something like that, or maybe late 60s or whatever the case. But they locked this man up when he was pretty much a kid, took his whole youth away. And the way you repay him is by giving him a few $1 million. But ain't no telling what he could have did with his life over the course of 50 years. Shit crazy. See if I can find that shit, man. Hold on. Now, this is crazy. Like, all these different black people, I just put in black men spent over 50 years in prison wrongfully convicted. And all these different black people come up. Innocent black man spent 50 years in prison. This was 2 years ago. Grandmother wrongfully convicted of murder released from prison. 12 years ago. Black man freed after 35 years for $50 theft. So this man spent 35 years in prison for stealing $50 and then, you know, was proven to be wrongfully convicted. The man wrongfully convicted after 36 years. This man spent 36 years in prison, was wrongfully convicted. That's crazy. It was rough. You had to fight. Wrongfully convicted man speaks. Man freed after spending 18 years in prison for murder after being set up by police. 84-year-old man declared wrongfully imprisoned after 46 years in prison. This man, 84 years old, he spent 46 years in prison for some shit he didn't do. These is all black people, mind you. 2 Massachusetts men spent 50 years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. Damn, these dudes actually look kind of young. I want to show y'all on the laptop, man, but it's on some bullshit. But let me see.
Investigators has learned that there are now calls his own 1991 Boston murder conviction thrown out back in 2021. Kamara was 17 when he was arrested. Foxworth was 23. Together, they spent nearly 50 years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. In both cases, evidence that could have pointed to the real killers was never turned over to their attorneys. But that's not all they have in common. The same Boston police detective and Suffolk County prosecutor worked on both cases.
It's a pattern. This is an illegal pattern, a pattern of misconduct that seems like no one wants to look into or deal with.
What do you think should happen now?
You have to look into the cases that these cops and this prosecutor handle.
And the only reason Barry's case came to me was because of the publicity from Robert Foxworth's case.
Attorney Amy Belger represents the men.
In both cases, it looks intentional. It looks like they did this on purpose. It wasn't an accident. No one made a mistake.
Belger is calling for an independent review of all cases the police detective and the prosecutor worked on. Both men are dead.
I don't believe that these are the only two wrongfully convicted innocent people that are victims.
They took away a youth. From my family,
Barry Kamara is looking to the future.
just live a normal life. Family, work, community.
He's been free on parole since 2009, but the conviction has hung over him.
They have the power to do what they did without being held accountable. They also have the power, to do the right thing.
Kamara says he's grateful the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office supported his request to have his conviction overturned, but he's also asking for the full review of all cases tied to the detective and the prosecutor. The DA's office declined to comment on these calls for a re-examination of other murder convictions. Mike Bodette, 5 Investigate.
Man, that's crazy. That's crazy. And then he had been on parole since 2009. But I guess maybe he still hadn't had his case overturned back then. I guess maybe he was on parole when the case got overturned. But, man, that's crazy. But you know how much of that has went on historically, and is whether the victim is black, white, candy stripe, whatever. So I guess it don't really matter. I mean, it does matter, but whether or not the victim is black or white or whatever, a white person is 7.5 times less likely to be wrongfully convicted than a black person.
A black defendant's risk of being wrongfully convicted spikes nearly twice as high if the victim is white or non-black compared to if the victim is black.
So that's fucking crazy. So as it is, just period, whatever the case is, a black person, an innocent black person is 7.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted than a white person. But if the victim is non-black, that number doubles. That's crazy.
However, because the vast majority of homicides in the U.S. are interracial, where the victim and the offender are the same race, the data pool for interracial homicides is already small. Within that small pool, cases featuring a non-black defendant and a black victim are mathematically the rarest. Because the number of these specific cases entering the system is so low, it does not provide a large enough statistical sample size for data registries to isolate a reliable wrongful conviction rate for that specific cross-section.
But so basically it's saying, that cases don't really get tried very often. It's rare. It's the most rare kind of case in which there's a black victim and a non-black defendant or a non-black person being charged. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just means that it doesn't really get tried in court. So you got to think about all the times where a white officer killed a black person and wasn't charged. An unarmed black person. A white officer or a non-black officer killed an unarmed black person and wasn't charged. Those types of cases oftentimes don't make it to court. And then, situations like is it Daniel? I think it was Daniel Obumseli in the Courtney Clenny girl, the white girl that killed her Nigerian boyfriend in Miami. Initially she wasn't arrested. They just immediately chalked it up as self-defense, but then, when they got some evidence, she ended up getting arrested. But it's a lot of cases like that where, a non-black person kills a black person and it's just immediately chalked up as self-defense. They don't get charged. Just like look at the situation with Ashley Janae and her white fiance. Even though that happened in a different country, they were both American, but it happened in Tanzania, Zanzibar. But even on the other side of the world, it's the same shit. This white man didn't at all get charged. He was just, suicide. No deep investigation into it or none of that. Let's see what else they saying.
2. Charging decisions dictate the data. As noted by groups like the Death Penalty Information Center, DPIC, the system treats cases very differently from the moment an arrest is made based on the race of the victim. Because homicides with black victims, regardless of the defendant's race, are statistically less likely to be upgraded to capital or first-degree murder charges by prosecutors, these cases feature less aggressive legal maneuvering. Because they rarely result in high-stakes death penalty or maximum-tier life sentences, they do not receive the same level of intensive post-conviction investigative scrutiny from conviction integrity units or innocence projects.
Yeah, so basically it's like when the victim is black, man, that's crazy. When the victim is black, they got it's less likely that they're gonna get like first degree murder or capital murder charges. Whereas if the victim is white or other, it's a much higher likelihood of them getting capital murder charges.
Since innocence organizations must prioritize limited resources, their efforts naturally gravitate toward high-tier sentences, like death row, where the data heavily trends toward black defendants with white or non-black victims. Consequently, if wrongful convictions do happen to non-black defendants who have killed black victims, they are far less likely to ever be discovered or formally recorded as an exoneration.
It's crazy. I'm just curious. Hold up. And it's crazy, right? So just trip off of this. So I did a search on YouTube, right? The first search, as y'all saw, was black man wrongfully convicted, exonerated, what have you. That was the first search. And it showed nothing but black guys. As I scrolled, it was a bunch of cases where black men were wrongfully convicted, right? And it didn't show any other race. But on YouTube, on the same search engine, I put in white man wrongfully convicted and exonerated. It got some white men in there, but it has more black men or black people. It got even some white women or black women. Like this wrongfully convicted woman exonerated 35 years after being, and it doesn't, I got to click on it to see the rest, but it's only a couple of white dudes on here, and I put in white man wrongfully convicted and exonerated. Man on death for 15 years, exonerated due to DNA. And I bet you ain't none of they victims black. I'm curious to see what this is about, though.
We've got a remarkable story today, and remarkable is the word here. A perseverance in the face of great injustice. Joyce Watkins spent decades in prison for a crime she did not commit because of bad science. A former boyfriend, also wrongly convicted, died in prison. According to the Innocence Project, false or misleading forensic evidence is a factor in nearly a quarter of all wrongful convictions in this country. Erin Moriarty is here with this particular story. Erin, this is just heartbreaking on many levels.
But it was an honor to meet Joyce. What happened to Joyce Watkins and her boyfriend, Charlie Dunn, is scary because it could happen to anyone. Hundreds of people have been convicted because of so-called...
Yeah, it could happen to anyone, but it disproportionately happens to black people. And it would be a white person. You got this panel with, you got black people up there with her, and Gail is really a white person in a black person's body. But you would have the white woman up there saying, oh, this could happen to anybody. It could happen to anybody, but it doesn't just happen to anybody. It happens disproportionately to black people.
Forensic sciences that are later discredited. And as you will see in this case, it's an error that can take years or even a lifetime to correct.
My family is my life. My niece is my nephew. That's my life.
Late on the night of June 26, 1987, Joyce Watkins drove from her home in Tennessee to pick up her great niece, who had been staying with a relative in Kentucky for 2 months. Almost immediately, Watkins could tell something was wrong and took the child in the morning to the emergency room. The 4-year-old, seen here as she was transferred to Vanderbilt Medical Center in Nashville, was suffering from head and vaginal injuries and died a day later. Joyce, did it ever occur to you at that moment that you would be accused of her death?
No.
But they questioned you.
Yes. They asked me what happened to her. I told them I didn't know. I couldn't tell them something that I didn't know because I don't know.
Despite evidence that the child had been injured while in Kentucky, Watkins and her boyfriend Charlie Dunn became suspects after an assistant medical examiner, visually observing the child's bruises, mistakenly determined that she had been injured during the 9 hours she was with the couple.
Everybody just got laser focused on Joyce and Charlie.
Jason Gitchner is a senior attorney with the Tennessee Innocence Project.
It didn't matter that they cooperated with the investigation, that they kept meeting with the police over and over again without a lawyer and saying, we didn't do this. Come take whatever evidence you want.
Watkins and Dunn were both convicted and sent to prison.
And you see how they say that they kept meeting with the police without a lawyer. All of that shit is by design, man. Here you had this woman, her and her boyfriend, they probably ain't never been through the system before, ain't never been in no situation like this. So, they thinking because they innocent, they can't possibly be convicted for this shit or charged with this shit. So they just meeting up with the police and just talking to the police freely, not understanding that anything you say will be used against you in the court of law. No attorneys present. They don't give a damn about these people. So this is what happens.
Prison for life.
It took everything away from us. It took us from our families, him from his kids, took us from everything we worked for.
Over the years, they tried and failed to get their convictions overturned. In 2015, while still incarcerated, Charlie Dunn died of throat cancer. Later that year, after 27 years in prison, Watkins was released on parole. What was your mission at that point?
To prove our innocence.
Last summer, the Conviction Review Unit of the Davidson County District Attorney's Office released a report finding that the methods used by the medical examiner have been largely discredited and determined that Joyce Watkins and Charlie Dunn are actually innocent. When you heard at the hearing last December just how wrong her medical evidence was in 1987, and that it was the main evidence against you and Charlie, how did you feel about that?
Broken, real heartbroken. Because it's something that should have never happened. That was when I was incarcerated.
It took 35 years, and the unwavering faith of Joyce Watkins, now 74 years old. But in January of this year, the court finally got it right.
Ms. Watkins, this charge against you is dismissed. And to the family of Charlie Dunn, the charge against Charlie Dunn is dismissed.
It was a happy day. It was a happy day.
But bittersweet, too. You never got to grieve either. You never had time to grieve the loss of Brandy.
No, I haven't. But I'm going to go and visit her grave in a few months.
Both Joyce Watkins and Charlie Dunn lost everything they had. Under Tennessee law, Joyce has to first apply for and then get a pardon from the governor to be eligible for any compensation. And there's likely nothing for the family of Charlie Dunn. I think the real takeaway on this story is the fact that there was too much weight put on one witness, that assistant medical examiner, because they ignored all the evidence that this child had problems.
Too much weight. So you and like I said, they always got the white person saying this shit. It was too much weight put on the medical examiner. So his last 28 years of life in prison for some shit that he didn't even do. Then this woman, you know, she spent, I think they said 27 years or 28 years, something like that. Then, you know, years on parole for some shit that she didn't do. And Tennessee don't even want to compensate them. Like the woman right here said, you know, most likely for Charlie Dunn, he ain't gonna get nothing. His family ain't gonna get shit. But they made a bankroll off of him while he was locked up. I guarantee you that. Shit crazy, man. Then this chick gonna say it was too much weight put on the medical examiner. Like, yeah, bitch, easy for your white ass to say. But, you know, back to the original point, though, man. It's unfortunate. It's sad. It's foul. But the reality is, man, this shit don't surprise me. The shit with Cyrus Carmack-Belton don't surprise me, and the shit with Karmelo Anthony don't surprise me. And the worst thing about it is that, like I've said before, we don't take the right recourse as black people. We gonna keep fueling these systems and these institutions that are rigged against us. We gonna keep fueling the shit. You know, we not gonna do what other people do when they feel injustice enacted against them. You know, because that's one thing about us as black people. We don't really have power when it comes to institutions and systems, But what we do have, the area that we do have a lot of power in is consumption. Nobody consumes like us. We are the biggest and worst consumers in America. Nobody consumes like us. We got the least money, but we spend the most money on shit that, we really don't need, that we shouldn't fuck with. We wear designer brands that don't even want us to wear their shit just simply because it's expensive. A lot of that shit be ugly as a motherfucker, but we still buy it and wear it because it's expensive, and we like to be able to say that we spent this much on that and that much on this and all this, that, and the third. But that's where our power is. But it's a lot we can do with that, though. It's a whole lot that we can do with, our power to consume. And I've said it before, but, when are we going to wake up and say, you know what? We got to take a stand. We got to actually do something about this shit. We're going to stop crying about it. We're going to stop marching about it. We're going to stop protesting about it. And we're going to actually do something about it. We're going to keep our money over here. We're not going to spend with these people, or we're not going to spend with those people. We're not going to spend here. We're not going to spend there. That's when something is going to change. Until we do that, it's going to be the same shit. We keep fueling the same shit that's just fucking us over. But that's another thing. See, it's a trip right on a to switch reels a little bit, right? MTR, Mediocre Tutorials and Reviews, shout out to him. He recently took a trip to Thailand. He's a content creator that lives in Atlanta. And, real big platform. He's almost at 1 million subscribers. But for those of y'all that might not be familiar with him, but he just took a trip to Thailand recently, right? And he got a lot of people in an uproar, mostly the dating coaches. And, a lot of these dating coaches are critical of, his take on Thailand and, him giving his testimony as to, how his trip was and how eye-opening it was and things like that, right? And how therapeutic it was for him. But you got a lot of dudes that had a lot to say about it, right? And one of the things that they was critical of was his take on the passport bros and how he was saying he understands the passport bros now, right? And y'all know me, Freeze is not a passport bro. But I have nothing against the passport bros, and shout out to the passport bros, right? Not the deviant weirdo ones, because, they do got some deviant weirdos in they mix, but just the same as any other category of people, right? But, MTR was saying how he understands the passport bros, and then he went into breaking down what he understands about them, right? But beyond just being a passport bro, just as a black person from the United States that travels, whether you consider yourself a passport bro or not, something that people overlook and underestimate because it's so indoctrinated in who they are is the freedom. The freedom from, not being hunted, not being preyed upon by a system that you pay taxes to fuel. You pay taxes to function. As an American, you pay taxes to fund a system that's set up to prey upon you and oppress you and keep their foot on your neck. This is what you pay taxes for. Right? So when you, as a black person, when you travel and you get away from that, it's such a breath of fresh air. See, people think so fucking small because they thinking that, you know, if you a black man and you go to places like Colombia, Thailand, Dominican Republic, that, you know, the primary reason for somebody to move to these places is because, you know, they want to get with the women over there. And I'm sure for a lot of people that have a lot to do with it, right? But somebody like me, right? You can't put that on me because this is what they'll say about passport bros, right? Like, oh, they ain't got no game. And, you know, they can't get no women where they from. That's why they go over there because, you know, they ain't got the game for the women over here. So they just go over there and pay for women and woo-de-woo-de-woo-de-woo-de-woo. That could be true. And if it is true, how can you be mad at them? You know, like, if you got a dude that is from the United States and, you know, whatever their lifestyle is or whatever their career is or whatever they got going on, right? They try to holler at different women, and the women that they like either reject them or are headaches and just, you know, expect a whole lot for a whole little and all them different types of things, right? But for one reason or another, they just don't have success with the women where they're from. And then they go somewhere else in the world and the women are just the total antonym of the women where they're from. Totally different from the women where they from. You know, they cater to them. They're feminine. They're not aggressive. They're soft and sweet, polite, courteous. You know, you can't be mad at them for wanting to go, you know, entertain that and deal with that as opposed to where they from, right? Now, me on the other hand, you know, I don't really have the issue of, you know, having problems getting women where I'm from. You know, in the United States, I don't have no problem getting with women. So that's not the reason why I travel. It's not the reason why I got my passport and wanted to go to some other countries, man. Because I just having such a hard time with the women where I'm from. I just was like, fuck it. I got to go somewhere else and see something else because these women here is just too much to deal with. You know, that ain't why I started traveling. Mainly, I just wanted to see other parts of the world and experience other cultures, other places, you know, different people. I just wanted to see, you know, different parts of the world and how they function, right? And see what else the world has to offer outside the United States. That's why I started moving around. But as I started moving around and spending more and more time outside the United States, I came to appreciate certain things. And one of those certain things that I appreciate is the fact that I do not have to worry about shit like what we talking about, being wrongfully convicted of some shit or unjustly tried for some shit that maybe I did do, but they just exaggerating the harshness of the charge and the sentencing simply because of the color of my skin. Right? Problems that white people don't have. Right? It just feels so good. Like, you know, I can't express that enough, and I don't think people really feel me when I say the shit. It just sounds like something. Oh, that's a good thing. No, that shit is beautiful. To be able to see the police and you don't have to worry about them fucking with you. Like, that shit is priceless, man. Like here in Peru, when I see the police, I don't get nervous. I don't have to worry about them, like, you know, passing up 50 white people to pull my black ass to the side and fuck with me. I don't have to worry about that. Man, and people just don't understand how beautiful of a feeling it is, man. And it don't have to do, because I know a lot of people will be like, oh, Freeze, you're a criminal, Freeze. You from the streets, Freeze. You've been in a life of crime and da-da-da-da-da. But, you know, that shit don't matter, man. That shit don't matter because there's so many people that I know and know of who have never lived a life of crime, and, you know, the police still fuck with them. That's just like, for instance, right? It's somebody that I know, man. Somebody that's near and dear to me, man. And he was married to this woman for over a decade. And this man has never been arrested in his adult life, right? And him and his wife got into an argument. His wife isn't black, but he's black. And they live in a predominantly white city. But this black man get into an argument with his white wife over a decade that they've been married. He ain't never got physical with her. He ain't even that type of guy. Goes to work, been at his job for 20-something years, you know, ain't living a life of crime, ain't in the streets, none of that. Tax-paying, civilian, all the shit, right? But him and his white wife get into an argument, and she decides to call the police and tell the police that he beat her up. Now, this is a white woman, so if there was any kind of like physical anything, you would think that there would be some evidence of that, right? And that the police would want to see that. But because her husband is a black man, the police come, don't ask no questions. Cuff him, take him to jail. Right? And, you know, he ended up getting let out. The case ended up getting dropped and shit like that. But just the humiliation of, you know, him going to jail. Like, I don't know if his neighbors saw him getting arrested. You know, people that he been living around for years. But that's humiliating and fucked up, man. That he would have to experience that. But what I do know is if that same man was over here where I'm at, or if he was in, you know, Colombia or Thailand or one of these other places, you know, it wouldn't have went that way. Because in these places, I can't speak for all the places, but like I know in Colombia, they don't just, you know, take the person's word. They got to actually see some kind of evidence before they just book you and take you away. But, you know, I say all of that to say, man, it's just, you know, people underestimate how good it feels to be somewhere where you don't have to worry about the police fucking with you. I seen a skit the other day on Instagram, right? I forget dude's name. It's something Williams, I think. The dude that be doing the skits where he playing Kevin Gates, and he be looking and sounding just like Kevin Gates. He funny as a motherfucker, right? And I think he from Baton Rouge too. Damn, what's dude's name? I can't remember his name, right? But he had a skit where he was in a SUV. They was like in a Suburban or a Yukon or something, right? And they riding, and it's a car full of black people. They probably like 6, 7 deep or some shit like that, right? But they riding, and they just having conversation. They just chopping it up, and as they riding, they hear a police siren, and everybody get quiet. And then they all like look behind them as the police car pass, make sure the police is like long gone. But they all get quiet and nervous, and then when the police is long gone, then they continue with their conversation. And the caption says something like, when black people see the police. It didn't say when criminals see the police, and they wasn't in the car doing no illegal shit. They was just some black people riding in the car. They had kids in the car and everything. But they heard the police siren, everybody got quiet, and they just looked. And then when the police was gone, they continue with their conversation. So, you'll have people that'll try to, make you believe that, if you're not doing anything, if you're not in the life of crime and you're not committing any crimes, you're not doing anything illegal, when the police come around, you don't have anything to worry about. Why are you nervous? What are you nervous for? Because I'm black. You know what I mean? And I can recall times when I was a kid, before I was even old enough to even think about a damn crime. I'm talking about 6, 7 years old. The police busting inside my grandma's house and drawing down on everybody. My grandma, me, other little kids, cousins of mine and shit like that. And making all of us put our hands up. Like I remember them times, man, and I can't forget shit like that. And I know I'm not the only person to have experienced shit like that as a very small child. As a very small black child. So, like I said, man, it's a beautiful feeling to be in a place where you don't have to worry about the motherfucking police preying upon you and trying to put you in their prison for as long as they could put you in there for. Three the Hard Way says, now that you answer my question, do you like Peru better than Colombia? I can't really say that right now. I love Colombia. I like Peru, but I haven't spent nearly as much time here in Peru as I have Colombia. But I like Peru though. Peru is nice. One thing that I like about Peru is that things seem to stay open later here. Like stores, even the gym I think stays open later here than Colombia. Just a little bit later, like an hour or two later. Another thing about Peru that I like, at least it seems this way so far, is that there's more places that accept card for payment. Like I've been in Peru for like a little bit over a week now. It's today the 11th. Yeah, I've been in Peru for like 9 days or some shit like that. And I haven't touched any cash since I've been here. I don't even know what, because the currency here is the sol. I don't even know what a sol feels like or looks like. I haven't touched no cash since I've been here. But a big part of the reason why is because a lot of places here accept card. And I've seen some scenarios where some places don't accept card, certain little mom and pop, corner stores, liquor stores or what have you, don't accept card, but a lot of places here accept card. So that's another thing I like about Peru. In Colombia, it's going to be a lot of situations where cash is going to come in handy. But, when I was in Colombia, you know, I had been there for so long, I had got to a point where a lot of times I didn't need cash there either. But so this is the thing about Colombia and Peru that's different from the United States, right? Now, you know how in the US we got Cash App. And these different countries have their equivalent to Cash App. They don't have Cash App, but they have an equivalent. So in Colombia, their equivalent to Cash App is called Nequi, Nequi, Nequi. That's like the Colombian equivalent to Cash App. In Peru, they have Yape, Yape. So Colombia has Nequi, Peru has Yape, and they're both, each place is equivalent to Cash App. They kind of function the same way Cash App functions, right? But the difference is with a lot of businesses here, like if you go to the grocery store, if you go shopping to buy something like clothes or some shit like that, most businesses here accept Yape as a payment. Like you can go, if you got the Yape app in your phone, you could just transfer the money from your Yape account to them. You know, in the US, you can't do that. Like if you go buy some shoes from a store, or if you go to the grocery store to buy something, you can use your Cash App card, but you can't transfer funds from your Cash App account to that store's Cash App account. But in these places you can, so that's kind of cool, right? So like, say in Colombia, you know, you going somewhere, like you go to a restaurant, you sit down and eat, and you want to pay for the food, and they don't accept card. You can pay with Nequi. So if you got Nequi on your phone, you can just transfer the funds to them that way. And a lot of businesses, they'll have the QR code posted up next to the cash register, so that you can just put your phone up and pay with the Nequi like that. Same here in Peru. They'll have the Yape QR code posted up next to the cash register, and you just scan it and pay like that. So that's one thing that's cool. Now, for people who are not from these places and don't have accounts in these places, because you got to have a local ID to get a Yape account, and the same thing in Colombia, you got to have a local ID to get a Nequi account. So, you know, I don't have neither one because I don't have local ID in either place. I don't have Yape here, and I don't have Nequi in Colombia. But give you a little bit of game, right, for those who might be unaware. So there's an app called Remitly, Remitly. Remitly. Remitly is a United States-based app. And what Remitly does is it allows you to transfer funds to people in these other places, right? Now, when I first went to Colombia and got hip to Remitly, Remitly would allow you to send funds to people who have Nequi, and I did it a few times too. Like it was a driver. Well, there is a driver out there in Colombia that I know. Like if I like say I was to fly to Medellin right now, I got a driver I could call. He'll come pick me up, take me where I need to go, and I paid him before with Remitly. And Remitly allowed me to send money to his Nequi account. But back last year, and even earlier this year, it would take like a couple of days. So if I send money from somebody get the money. But this year, I think sometime in the middle of January, they came with this app called BreeB. Now BreeB is, I guess you could say, it's more like Zelle. BreeB is kind of more like Zelle. So if you have a Colombian bank account, BreeB is already integrated in your Colombia bank account. Just like if you got a US bank account, Zelle is already in there in the app. Like say you got, like me, I got Chase. When I download the Chase app to my phone, it automatically got Zelle in it. In Colombia, I got a bank account too, and my banking app in Colombia already has BRIB in it, right? So Remitly allows you to send funds through BRIB. And what's dope about BRIB, unlike the US, right? I'm getting into a whole bunch of game about that. I should have made a separate video about this shit. And I probably will still. But okay, so BRIB, right? Like I said, BRIB is kind of like Colombia's equivalent to Zelle. And it just came out like earlier this year. But unlike the US, what's dope about Colombia is that if you have BRIB, it is compatible with Nequi. So it's like BRIB is Colombia's equivalent to Zelle. Nequi is Colombia's equivalent to Cash App. But unlike in the US, see, like in the US, if you have Zelle, you can't send money directly to Cash App, and vice versa. If you have Cash App, you can't send money directly to Zelle. But in Colombia, you can send money directly between BRIB and Nequi. So that's actually kind of dope. So Remitly, YouTube always playing with a pimp, man. God damn. Okay. The live was tripping for a minute, but I wanted to show y'all. My view at the gym, overlooking the ocean from the gym. This shit dope as hell. Hold on. That shit dope as hell. Let me show you again. I gotta let y'all get a dose of that one. I know it's a short little video, but check it out. So, you know, man, motherfucker get to look at the gym, look at the Pacific Ocean while I'm at the gym, I mean. So it's real nice here, and it's a real at least a little bit that I've seen. You know, Lima is a pretty big city, so there's a lot that I have yet to see because I've only been here for a week and some change. So it's a whole lot for me to explore around here that I definitely plan on checking out. But yeah, you know, it's from my experience so far, a lot of these Latin American cities, even the ones that I haven't been to but I've researched, a lot of them have a lot of similarities. So just like in Colombia, you know, a lot of stuff is cheap. Things here, that's one thing I've noticed, and I was told that before I came here, and I've seen it firsthand now. Things here are a little bit more expensive. Not way more expensive, but things here are a little more expensive than Colombia. A little bit. But still much cheaper than in the United States. Just a little more expensive than Colombia, though. So, you know, if you come in here from the U.S. with your U.S. dollar is still going to take you very far here. Not as far as Colombia, but it's still going to take you far here. So. And it's a thing too, right? Speaking of Peru, you know, Some people, and this goes beyond Peru. It goes for any place, right? But some people here, or who have been here, have complained about it. Like I seen different videos of people from the U.S. coming here and complaining about it. But I've seen some dope ass shit here, man, that I haven't seen yet, that I haven't went to yet, but I'm gonna go check out, like restaurants. So, you know, they say that Lima, Peru is the gastronomy capital of Latin America. So when it comes to food, they have a reputation for having the best food here. So it's some dope ass restaurants that I've researched that I'm definitely going to check out while I'm here. So testimony of why they don't like Peru deter you from coming here. It's a beautiful place. I don't believe they have the same level of nightlife like a Medellin. So maybe that's why certain people don't like it here as much, because the nightlife isn't the same. But if you somebody who don't really care about that type of shit like me, like I don't really care about going to clubs and partying. I don't drink, so it ain't like I'm trying to go to the bar and, you know, buy bottles and pop bottles and all. I ain't, you know, I'm not into that type of shit. So if you somebody like me that don't care about that type of shit, man, you'll love Peru. It's a beautiful place. But hold on. Damn. Okay, I thought this shit crazy, man. It's always some shit, boy. Goodness. What is going on? Okay, it looks like we back cool now. Live was tripping for a minute again, but damn. Think y'all can hear me and see me again. Cool. Shit. It's always something. Hey, and Mize, man, I don't know what's up with my Mize, man, but y'all y'all been slacking on your job today, man. What's happening with my Mize, man? Y'all letting people get away with murder in the chat.